All right. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? Welcome to episode 4 of Creatorcast. For those of you wondering about what is Creatorcast, ultimately, right now, there is a movement happening where individuals are able to go online and create and actually make a business online. And it's a complicated world in sort of navigating it. And so we want to help those folks who are creators, who are building businesses online, navigate that space. And so we've been interviewing amazing folks who've been using Crowdcast, to kind of basically dig into their story about what they've been doing and how we can share some of that information with you. Before I introduce today's guests, just some housekeeping stuff. First, if you have any questions at any time, right underneath my face, you're going to see an Ask a Question section. Type in a question there for Rachel, and we're going to be able to get to that towards the end. We also on Crowdcast have the ability to invite you up on screen. So if you want to come up, let us know in the chat as well. And with that, first of all, where is everyone tuning in from? I see Joaquim, always great to see you in the audience, calling in from Stockholm. You might notice I've got a little funky voice thing going on just at the end of cold. So hopefully my voice holds up throughout the event today. Luna from Virginia, good to see you again as well. And I'm broadcasting from the US for the first time in 3 months. I'm actually in New Jersey right now, visiting family. So with all that, excited to just be kind of back on home, back home and getting rested. Luca from Slovenia, welcome. Heather from Panama, wow, nice. Yeah, keep on posting into the chat where you guys are tuning in from. We're also streaming this event out to Facebook and YouTube. So the folks out in Facebook, hey there. We're not actually monitoring the chat in Facebook. Click the link above and join the Crowdcast over here where we can actually see your chat, where you can actually ask your questions and be a part of the conversation, and we can even invite you up. Same with the folks in YouTube, welcome. We're just testing it out just to stream out to those places to see how the reaction is. So yeah, without further ado, let me introduce our guest today. So our guest is Rachel Elnar, and Rachel's been hosting a show called TypeEd on Crowdcast for basically almost 2 years now. And we loved seeing her shows, and it's basically a show on typographic design, interviewing all sorts of folks in that field. And more recently, she's also been working with Adobe to do these awesome creative jams around design thinking. So we're going to be talking about all things from like design, teaching design over the web, and just digging into the story of Rachel because she's an amazing human being. So with that, I'm going to bring up Rachel. Hey there, how are you doing?
How are you doing? Good. Good. Welcome back to the States.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Now, first of all, where are you tuning in from today?
Right now, I'm at Adobe's office in San Francisco. One of many of them. We're in a brand new building right next to the California College of Arts.
That's very cool. Now, I don't think it's really common for, I don't know that many like typographic shows online, right? One thing that I really like to kick things off with is just to kind of go back to the beginning, right? How did you get started? I mean, were you always in design? Were you always thinking about design? Like, what was the beginnings for you?
Well, let's see. That goes back to when I was 6. So I've always been into arts and design. I have been teaching UI, UX, and web design for the last 18 years in universities. And love the design community. So I think the one thing that really got me into working with designers is our local AIJ chapter, which is in Los Angeles. And I joined the leadership, I joined the board, and got really far into the leadership, which is the AIJ National.
So what is AIJ?
Thank you. So AIJ is the American Institute of Graphic Arts, and it is in the U.S. the largest design organization. And so through that, I was able to connect with all the boards or all the chapters throughout the U.S. and just loved, talking with other designers, getting to know my peers, understanding their challenges, and in addition to also teaching, having an endless amount of resources, and then just being able to learn all the time. So yeah, I love the design community. And so that's this part of the design of my design career started.
Was this in college or post?
It was just right after
So,
college.
so
Yeah,
did
right
you
after
study design
college.
formally, or this is something that you joined afterwards?
I joined it while I was in college, but mostly got involved afterwards. Yeah, yeah, and studied design. And then I, of course, have been teaching design for 18 years. So been doing it for a long time.
Wow. Okay. And so that's amazing. With AIG, that gave you like an access to a whole community. What were the steps from going from working with the community of AIG and then deciding to go into more specific typography and then eventually a show?
So, well, let's see. After I was finished teaching for a little while, I decided to open up a design firm with my partner, Michael, and found out that he is just amazing at typography. He had all these great things. He learned from the cold type era, which is a time that it was prior to the computer. Okay. So,
Hmm.
yeah, there was a time prior to the computer where we did graphic design by hand. And that was like, specifying your font and the size, and then you sent it out, and then you would get the type the next day and you would glue it down, right? So
That's
it's
cool.
way old school design, right? So you really had to know your type before you began this process. And now with people, with my students in designing, they just don't know how typography works. So Michael and I decided to start an education program called TypeEd out of our design studio. And we use it to not only teach in-person classes, but also go around and teach small groups, in-person teams, studios. We've trained teams not only from Adobe, but also like Facebook and Living Spaces and Mattel and Blizzard and whatnot. So we go into these in-house teams and we help train them with their typography. How the typography dojo started and me working with Crowdcast was that it's great learning from Michael, but I didn't want Michael to be my only teacher.
Mm.
So I thought, why don't I just start something where I get to learn from a different typographer, lettering artist every 2 weeks. And so I thought of the idea of you doing a podcast, but then, design is really visual. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll just do it on Skype and just record them and do. But then I found Crowdcast, and actually I didn't find you guys until I think about 6 months of researching many different webinar platforms. I mean, there was GoToMeeting and all these other things that were really very, to me, prohibitive in terms of getting an interviewee on, because there's so much of that tech. I mean, just interviewing is already anxiety
Right.
ridden for most people. So if you add another layer of complicated tech, I knew I wasn't going to be able to A, learn from someone, and B, get an audience. Um, I was not looking for an audience at first. I was just looking for education. But the easier the platform it was going to be, the better it would be for not only me, the interviewee, but anyone else who wanted to join. So I use Crowdcast to develop Typography Dojo, which I do every 2 weeks, and talk to a typographer. And I'm learning a lot. And not that Michael's not a good teacher, but I like to learn other areas of typography as well.
That's really cool. So ultimately, it started from wanting yourself to kind of learn from others, and in the
Yes.
process, to share that learning with the other folks who might be interested. So it was very much like driven by just your own curiosity. And then, what was the reaction, for the designers? I mean, did you first share that with the AIGA community?
I did. I shared it with them, and then I just shared it with TypeEd followers, people who really liked our teachings. And I think it opened up a new audience for us, because we were not just teaching digital typography, but opening up to people who were interested in web typography, interested in lettering artists, people who are doing lettering with food, people who are analyzing the typography of scripts in Hollywood, and how the formatting of it says whether it's a comedy or a drama. So really interesting areas of typography that I never knew existed. So I'm able to find new avenues of type through this show.
That's cool. I mean, there's a whole I guess, area that I'd love to dig into about just typography. Ultimately, do you see there to be like a movement towards going back to cold typography where people are doing things by hand in the world that we're in right now? Everything's so digital and created through algorithms many times, right? So is that something you're seeing?
Well, I think they are wanting to do something by hand, not necessarily cold type, because that just takes too long to get your fonts on a page.
Hmm.
2 days takes too long. But yeah, whether it is forming letters out of food or objects and taking photos of it and using it as artwork on other campaigns, yeah, I think that people in the digital world are really missing that human touch. So I think there is some sort of movement.
Hmm.
And then also typography in general, there are many, I mean, we are consuming most of our content online and on screens. And those people who are designing for screens are not necessarily trained in design, or they're developers or whatnot. So I feel like um, people who are consuming content have a hard time finding what they're looking for. And that's also what we're trying to help with.
Interesting. So, I mean, you said you came from the graphic design background, right? Were you
Mhm.
designing websites as well, like the interfaces of websites, or was it more like posters and images?
I was doing both. We were doing some branding, a lot of annual reports, a lot of print
Hmm.
work. And then, of course, I was teaching web design as well. So I was doing websites. So I mean, I was even teaching Flash and Perl scripts and all sorts of old school stuff.
Wow, Flash, I remember those days. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because ultimately, we're trying to figure out how to communicate an idea, right? And you're kind of limited by, I mean, I've definitely been frustrated with, designing like the lettering in Crowdcast and the fonts that we're using. Most recently, we like redesigned our blog, and I spent way too much time trying to figure out what the right fonts were, and you're kind of
Mhm.
boxed into what's available and a lot of
Right.
other sort of rules that you have to follow around accessibility. Um, and so type has the power of like conveying like a feeling, right? So like uh, why yeah, like what are some of the like the best use cases that you've seen of great like, typography?
Right. So some of the better typography are those that take into consideration hierarchy,
Hmm.
um, thinking about the user experience, what you want them to see first, second, third, and then adjusting your type to go with that. So whether it's using bold, if that's the first thing you want them to see, or the size, playing with the size. Some other tips are just be careful of the really light sans serifs, as I've mentioned to you before, Sai. Is like when they're really light and they're
Hmm.
really small, it's really hard to see, especially on low retina screens or low resolution screens. They get broken up. Typically, the very light or thin fonts you want to use large, and those that are closer to medium book and regular you want to use at text size. So, and then again, on the opposite end, if they're really, really thick and heavy and extra bold, you want to use those large as well, because the very thick fonts will have their counters, which are like the O and the A, the holes in the middle of those letter forms. Those will close up when the type gets really small.
Wow. Okay. I feel like we just got like a quick lesson on like a brief intro to good design for type. Um, I mean, you mentioned this is a very visual, obviously a very visual format. How have you
Mhm.
adapted it to work with live? And why live over something that's a recorded series?
That is a good question. It was just so much easier to produce than to
That's good
record
to
and
hear.
to
Yeah.
edit. I have to say, yeah, I'm like editing and I love editing video, but it just takes a lot of brain work. And I would not be able to produce as many shows if I was editing all these by myself.
Hmm.
So it's much better if I just do it live. And then Crowdcast automatically records it. And now it's in HD, which I'm so happy about. And so I have a library of great information for people who want to access it. And it took me almost no time at all. So um, Ease of use and laziness is the first reason why I went for live over recorded. Yeah.
Those are great reasons. But with regards to actually like showing the screen, and especially for physical stuff where you're trying to angle the camera on like the hands and
Mm.
above the head, like how are you managing that? And what is your setup with that?
So we don't do it that often in terms of, showing the hands. So if I do a typography dojo interview and I have a lettering artist who wants to demonstrate, they'll sometimes use their phone or use a second camera. I mean, it's very, when you're live, it's very off the cuff and casual. I mean, I've had people stop in the middle of the interview and run off and come back with a charger because their computer is dying. And so, things that are moving around with the camera, I think the audience really understands that it's happening real time, and there's not high production values. So second cameras are totally fine. We usually will share a screen. So I'll ask the presenters or whether we're teaching a class or we are doing an interview, that they show something on screen, whether it's a video of them doing some lettering or just explaining their process.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes they've gotten into the software. I've had type designers will show us their Bezier curves inside the font development software to show us, specific angles and whatnot. It gets really geeky.
No, I love that stuff. With sort of just the whole struggle of like building an audience, you mentioned that this was something you did for yourself, and the audience just kind of found itself. Has that audience been growing bigger than you expected, or how hard has it been to manage the growth of that audience, if you've been focused on that?
Yeah, so people interested in typography, they're really, really very, very small. People interested in design is a large community, but typography is even a smaller section of design. It's
Mm-hmm.
not doesn't encompass everything. So we've been growing definitely an audience, especially with the Typography Dojo show. But it's how I'm managing it is, I don't know if I'm managing it well. Actually, there's some emails that I just miss. I try to do as much live as possible. We do also do our one-on-ones and group trainings and things like that through like private crowdcasts. And maybe that's the best way for us to keep in contact, is to just have these one-on-one or these live sessions. And I've also been using emails I've been using Drip in order to, send out blasts after each one or before each one. And I think that's helping.
Okay,
The integration really helps. Mm-hmm.
cool. Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. One of the things that we think about a lot, and this talk isn't meant to talk about Crowdcast at all. It's more about focusing on you. But I'm really
Sure, sure.
curious, how are you integrating it with Drip and other applications? I'm actually doing that right now for Creatorcast, and so we're realizing as we do this show all the different ways we need to improve these integrations. But yeah, what's your high level setup between Drip and Crowdcast? And for the folks listening in, Drip is like an email marketing platform, similar to Mailchimp and ConvertKit.
Right. So how I set up Drip is typically I'll set up certain tags within the email marketing program. If I know that I have a few shows coming up, which sometimes I don't have set up ahead of time, but like, for example, if I have a lettering artist who is coming on in about 2 weeks, what happens is when people register for that lettering artist interview, they are tagged in Drip that they're interested in lettering. And so that helps to segment my funnel a little bit in terms of like what area of typography they're interested in, lettering or basics, characters, words. Is it more intermediate, like sentences, paragraphs, which are like posters and basic websites, or is it more advanced? Like, say I'm interviewing Nigel French, and he talks about like the really intricate details in doing multi-page documents, so that person will be tagged as very advanced typographer. So just their interest in the show and different guests will help me to segment who they are and how I might approach them in terms of what they're looking for in typography.
And then once you've got them segmented based on like the level of maybe their experience, do you say, okay, everyone who's medium level or intermediate level and up, you email blast about the Crowdcast event?
I will actually, about the Crowdcast events, I'll do as a general
So
blast.
everyone who's on your list will
But
get
what
that.
I use,
Mm.
right, everyone who's on the list. And so, but what I do with those segments is if I have to write up a quick lesson and it's intermediate, I will only send it to that segment. Or if we have a class or a one-on-one or a group coaching session that's for advanced typographers, then I'll only send it to those people. So it's really helped me to figure out who our audience is and not just keep blasting everybody
Mm-hmm.
because that will just result in really low
Yeah,
engagement.
yeah. And so then as new people register for your events that have never been in your email list, do you automatically add them?
Well, I don't, but yes, the system does.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. And then do you do
Yeah.
any sort of like follow-up after your events, or is it more like a general follow-up for just any for the whole list?
I will try to do a follow-up if there's a lot of links or resources that the interviewee mentions, and not everyone can write them down or not everybody's sharing them in the chat, then typically I'll follow up with those links.
Got
Kind
it.
of like a podcast notes, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting here. I mean, I think different people creating a live show have different levels of like intention or around or how much energy they put behind just like getting data driven around growing their show. It feels to me that
Hmm.
for you, like because this is just like an addition to sort of all the other stuff that TypeEd is, it's kind of nice because you just get to not focus too much on and worry too much on like, oh, what's the ROI on this, right?
Right.
And just kind of create content for the community, and it naturally brings people who are interested in your courses and the membership and things like that.
Right. First and foremost, I do use it for
Hmm.
marketing. Second of all, we do use it for teaching. So we have a regular varsity team group who will come in, and that's a group coaching. And so we'll meet here in Crowdcast once a week or once a month, whatnot.
That's
Yeah,
cool. By the way, Joaquim from the audience, he's asking, bi-weekly is impressive. How do you prepare?
that's a really good question. So how I prepare is typically I'll reach out to someone who I'm interested in interviewing months ahead of time, and then just get them ready. So let them know what I'm interested in. If there's questions, I'll send them the questions. But for most part, I don't really give them too much of a clue. What I would rather have is for them to do a talk, a little bit of a presentation, ask them to speak for about 15-20 minutes. Not all my guests are interested in doing a talk or a presentation. Sometimes they just want a conversation, which is fine as long as they can still show visuals. And then I will do a quick tech check with them a week prior, and
Mm.
then showtime. So it doesn't take much time on my end. So I'm hoping that the quality of the shows are still okay because it's something that, like you said, is just addition to everything else that I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's a interesting topic. Like how much time do you put into upfront, to create the live show?
Mhm.
Ultimately, I think what we're seeing is, people one want to connect live, and the being there, having the actual person available to take your questions and interact with them is something that's really, really powerful that hasn't really been possible before. Um,
Mhm.
and for you as the host of your show, right? You don't want to think about editing software and post event sound editing and video editing and all that stuff. And you want to continue producing. And so, yeah, we're constantly thinking about how can we improve the live event experience so that you can basically edit live, and have the end of the event, you already have a perfectly or as well as you can edited event that or replay that people can watch and have a similar value of just being there live. Um, But yeah, so you're like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on live, focus on getting visuals on board because ultimately that's very key for the show, and focus
Mhm.
on creating good content as opposed to polished editing and animations and things like that.
Right. So where it changes a little bit is for my work with Adobe. So once I was employed by Adobe, they asked me to kind of replicate what I'm doing here with
Hmm.
TypeEd for them as well. They have an in-person event called the Creative Jam, where it is a two-part event. The first part is a tournament, and designers come together, whether they are students or from the community, and they are challenged with a design brief, and they do some design thinking. They develop a user experience through 5 or more screens as a team, and then they present. There's also during this time speakers, design luminaries at the time who will like share their secrets or their process that to help entertain them while they're working. And then the second part is their presentations. So they present to the audience and their work. They have about 3 minutes. And then we have judges who give back some feedback. So Adobe asks, how can we translate that in-person experience to an online experience? So I said, okay, well, this is really easy because I can see Crowdcast being a place that makes it easy for people to share on the fly. I mean, we have all sorts of teams who have never been on Crowdcast, and all of a sudden they're sharing their screens and getting on video and demonstrating their work to the judges. So yeah, we're doing these live events now for Adobe, and they're being done maybe once a week, maybe twice a week. And that takes way more setup only because of the amount of people who are involved. So for my TypeEd type dojos, it's only me and another person. But for these events, we might have, like, for example, I have a creative jam next week, Tuesday, that will have 200 students and 5 instructors, faculty who will be on, 2 people from Adobe who will be doing a boot camp in XD, and 3 judges. And so we have to manage a lot of people. I have a technical director on board. I have a colleague who's also handling the judging and real-time scoring.
Wow.
It's quite a production. Yeah, so the teams do present their work on screen, and they also talk on video in terms of what their event is or what their project is, and the judges are watching, and then the judges get pulled up on screen.
That's that's
They
very
give
cool.
feedback, and during that time, they're also scoring. So by the time the judges come down, we announce the first, second, and third winner. So it is unbelievably a huge amount of stress just to
And how
coordinate
long
and
is
get
this?
everyone
Is
going.
it like an hour that everything happens?
No, there's no way. So the events are between 4 and 5
Okay, so you
hours.
break it up into like
Uh,
multiple
so
sessions then.
so we have to break it
Mhm.
up. Yeah. So, because we only have a 2 hour recording time, we have to break it up. But it's good because we give the students some time with not having to tune in. They don't have to listen to us, or they don't have to watch a speaker. They get some time to really work. And then we come back up. We say, time's up, pencils down. Let's, see your links. And they post their links. The judges take a look. They start to do their presentations, and we go from there.
Wow. I
So
wasn't aware of like to the
it is a
extent
lot.
that all these variables and pieces work together to create this workshop. I was under the impression it was like an hour to 2 hour long thing. But that's pretty epic. That's amazing. So it's basically like a design thinking workshop internally. Are you guys ever
It's like a
a
hackathon.
hackathon? Wow. Are you guys ever planning to do
Yeah.
something like that with the greater public?
I'm sorry, say
Are
that
you guys ever
again?
planning to do something like these hackathons with
Oh,
the public community of Adobe or just in general?
maybe. So, but right now they're with specific Adobe
Mhm.
clients. So it would be like, for example, the one that we have next week is with 4 Toronto area design schools. We've been doing them specifically with specific schools or agencies, like we did one with just Aquint. We've done one with SODA, the Society of Digital Agencies. So just small, kind of keep them a little bit contained. I don't know if we can do 1,000 of 1,000 people in here. So
Well, it supports it if you guys, want to scale that big. That's amazing. So anyone who's watching, if you're in a design company or design field, you can hold really amazing design workshops in Crowdcast. Cool. So I think the topic of design thinking is something that a lot of people don't really know too much about. What's your like quick summary or definition of what is design thinking?
let's see. So design thinking is basically taking a topic and try to see how you can make things better for people through design. It is both. It's more like service design actually. How can you service someone or human centered design? But yeah, the word design thinking does get kind of thrown around, and people are not sure. We do this with Adobe XD, and there's many different other prototype softwares. There's Envision and Marvel app and whatnot, where you can just design out screens, design out an experience, maybe for an app or a website, to help people either, connect, to socialize, to encourage people to do something. A lot of the design briefs we've been doing are very community focused, so community impact
Mm,
or social cohesion, or challenging the students to think, what are ways you can do to help the homeless, to help animal shelters, allow people to adopt pets online. So there's many different ways they try to break the mold or break the box of what's out there now, and use the design software to think of different ways.
I see. What would you say is like one of your favorite design thinking projects or questions that people had to answer?
Let's see. We've had so many of them. I thought there was one that we had for social cohesion, which was address a community or a portion of a community and figure out how to connect them. So social
That's
cohesion
interesting.
is needed in areas that people are very segmented, and just to get them to connect will help the community overall. Social mobility would be one of them. How do we take a portion of the community and give them a little bit of mobility, either through education or financial or just access to jobs? Yeah, those are the type of prompts that we give to the students.
That's really powerful. I mean, ultimately, it's like
Mhm.
um, I think people associate design, especially if maybe some of the folks coming into the show today, around like user interfaces and screens.
Mhm.
And I think more people need to hear about this side of, sort of the whole design field around really solving, um, I guess, more society, like issues that affect the greater society and ways of
Right.
using design to sort of aid that process. And the output still might be screens and images, because that's the tools of what we have today, but really to,
Mhm.
tackle that bigger problem. For the folks who are just joining, because I see a lot of folks recently joined, we're talking to Rachel Elnar from TypeEd. If you guys are in the design field or have any questions about design for Rachel, you can drop them into the Ask a Question section. If you're not in Crowdcast, you're on Facebook or YouTube, click on the Crowdcast link and you can join us here. Sweet. So yeah, with that, would you say that so you're doing a mix of these really highly produced workshops with Adobe, and you also have your show, which is also tied to your agency. First of all, are you still doing the agency? Is that okay? So
Yes.
there's a lot of juggling happening.
I don't sleep.
Wow, yeah. Actually, I feel like you're also the first person to comment in the Facebook community, so you're very, very active. Now, have you considered doing paid events, like paid workshops, or have you already done it? Maybe you already have.
I have not. So yes, that's one thing that I wanted to do for Typography Dojo, is to do some sort of summit.
Mm,
Although I've been asking you guys, like, how can I
hmm
do it? How can I set this up and planning this out? It's not something I've really taken on quite yet. So I have to really feel very comfortable about all aspects of, from marketing to execution to what is the value or what do the participants get at the end. I don't know if I feel good about them just having access to a crowdcast string of events as the final. It might be something that I have to edit down later. And because of that slight complexity, I have not done a paid event yet. So right now everything is kind of free. So
Wow, I would love to help out if you're serious about like doing an online summit. Um, I
hmm
can tell you that we don't have that many on design specifically. You know, we have a wide variety of things on like programming, like the Hack Summit, for example, on marketing, many summits on that, and different topics in marketing. On crypto is very popular these days, but we haven't really seen a really well executed like leaders of design coming together. And I think
hmm
that you are probably really well positioned to do something like that.
I would love to do that. Yeah. It just takes a little bit of planning ahead of time
Hmm.
for me. And so when right now, I'm a little bit busy with Adobe. And so when this is over, then I'll probably get back to planning that. But yeah, it's something that I've already said that's been published in a magazine. So I think I have to do it because people have asked me.
And
Yeah.
it's
So would love
now
to
it's
do
official on a crowdcast. Um,
that. Exactly.
that's cool. I mean, ultimately, yeah, one of the original visions for Crowdcast was to do conferences and virtual summits, and so it's just exciting, to hear more examples of events where basically the leaders of a certain industry come together to share ideas, because that's something that has been limited to folks who can just physically be there, so it kind of creates almost a problem of diversity within design when, like in San Francisco,
hmm
for example, there, sometimes you'll have pockets of designers that, for the most part, are thinking in the same way, and it essentially prevents new ideas from entering that space, and the space at which, or I guess, like the boundary of problems that they're trying to solve gets limited unless you
Yeah.
bring in other voices. So, doing something virtual, as much as I'm the biggest fan of like in-person conversations, opens it up to that greater world. Folks in Brazil, India, China who can't be there in San Francisco or LA or wherever these conferences are to participate. That's cool.
Yeah, and there's one thing that we've been trying to figure out is how to meld both of them together, the in-person experience and also the online, live experience. It's been very challenging. So, of course, when you have 100 people in a room and you've got a speaker, and then you also want to put it on Crowdcast, there's all sorts of feedback issues, and we're actually trying to work that out. How can we both do 100 to 200 person in-person experience and also have it seamlessly on Crowdcast with the speaker not only aware of the physical space but also aware of the virtual space, the virtual audience as well. So we tried it already with an event in South Africa with a company called Media 24. They had about 100 maybe 80 people in audience. And then we had a speaker who was at Myanmar. We had a speaker on the East Coast, and then one speaker that was there in South Africa. And it was just, we were using the Crowdcast phone app to video them. It was a little bit difficult.
Wow.
I have to say that we are still trying to figure all this, the camera situation out, the audio situation out. But we're hoping to meld those two
Wow.
together.
Yeah, we call those hybrid events. For the folks watching, basically, I mean, there's mainly two categories of events. There is an in-person conference, a physical event, where there's, let's say 300 people in the audience, you're on stage and with the people in the audience. That's very common. And then there's a virtual event like Crowdcast, where everyone is
Mhm.
virtual, all the speakers are. But now, yeah, like you're mentioning, there's like a new type of event that's possible thanks like to like Crowdcast, and where you can do a hybrid event where the virtual audience and the physical audience can interact, but it's very tricky to pull off because of the audio issues.
Very.
Um, we, yeah, we did one where we had this one. This is one that I was directly involved with. I was actually like the AV guy on site. This is how far
Uh-huh.
we go to help customers. We had an event in San Francisco for a really awesome community called the Consciousness Hacking, community, and we had a room of about maybe 300 people in San Francisco, And then the main speaker that was joining us was actually joining us through Crowdcast from Colorado. This guy, Ken Wilber, another whole amazing human being. And the folks on stage was using Crowdcast to speak with Ken, but also stream out the event to a virtual audience. And we were able to invite up, like, and that virtual audience also had individual rooms in Philadelphia and LA that are just as big streaming the event. And we were also able to like pull up those guys, let's say in Philadelphia, onto the screen to ask kind of question. So you can imagine,
That's
yeah, we
great.
pulled it off, but ultimately it was we ended up having to sacrifice on video quality because of the particular situation that we're in the physical room. But yeah, we're interested in figuring out how to better handle that, how to better handle like
Yes.
these hybrid use case scenarios. But you're definitely on the forefront right here because I don't think people have been really experimenting with that as much. At the very least, more and more, what's getting common is to bring in the virtual audience into the physical space as far as like seeing their questions being voted up and being like, oh, I see, Nasima asked a really fascinating question. Let's ask that to the guests that we have on screen.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, you can only do so much. I mean, what I've been telling our universities, our schools that we work with at Adobe is that the event is going to be like a silent disco. Have you ever been to a silent disco? And they're usually, no, what is that? Everyone has headphones and everyone's dancing, but it's totally quiet in the room. And so that's how our events will go sometimes. I ask them not to have their speakers on in the room in front of everyone. And everyone is plugged in with their earbuds, which I'm sure, most of these people are not really happy about because their attention is on the screen and not what's happening. But it's really the only way that we can get those to, the hybrid event to go without a glitch is to have everybody really plugged in and still somewhat aware with what's happening around them. It's very difficult, but we are
Wow,
trying.
that is very cool. That's very cool that you guys are experimenting in that world. Okay, so with that, I mean, we talked about sort of the different types of events that you're doing. What would you say to the like to the folks who are getting started to start their own show today? I mean, with all the different sort of ways of going about it, like what advice would you have for someone getting started today?
Well,
And it can't
let's
be
say if you're
used
just going to get started
Crowdcast.
with a show, yeah, essentially, yeah. No, so if it was, if you're using a Crowdcast, for example, if you just want to start a series, I would say just do it. Like my first one, I was so scared to begin because I know once you begin that cadence, there's this expectation, right, which I think causes a lot of anxiety with creators. Just get started. I mean, you have to sort of jump in the pool and just start swimming. So I asked a friend who again, it was my first time, so I had never really done one. I'd done test ones, and we just jumped online. I didn't even really announce it. I just kind of jumped online. We invited a few people, and it turned out great. There was a uh, a school here in San Francisco. I don't remember which one, but he decided to show it to his whole class. And so the class got online and they started chatting, and it really created this engagement that got me super excited. And then we also were able to pull up their video and see the whole class. And I think my interviewee was super excited because she saw, wow, there is really people behind the camera who are watching and who had questions. And so after that, I was sort of hooked and been doing it for 2 years
Now,
ever
I'm
since.
sure a lot of people are asking this question, like why not just go on Facebook Live or YouTube Live? Like why did you decide, like what for you, what were the main value of using something like Crowdcast over social media
Well,
platforms?
I think Facebook Live is fine. I have used Be Live before. I've used just plain Facebook Live. Um, I think the ability to break out the questions versus the chat is very helpful because with Facebook Live you can't really do that. Everybody is sort of just chit chatting away, and you're not really sure which are being directed to you or not. Um, I actually love Facebook Live because of the way that the algorithm is, but not everybody's on Facebook either. I really dislike YouTube. We've done some YouTube lives as well, but I'm not a huge fan just because to me there's a lack of authenticity. I mean, people can use whatever name they want for their username. You don't know who you're talking to. It just feels a little more small and intimate within Crowdcast. And then if we need the ability to broadcast out onto Facebook and YouTube, I can do that, and I don't have to worry about those audiences.
Yeah, that's interesting here. I mean, ultimately, we get a lot. We're sort of straddling the line between like the webinar world and live streaming platforms, and so we get like a wide variety of people showing up using Crowdcast, and that's a common question that people are generally struggling with: is do I double down on a platform that's a social media platform or a platform that I own? Like what do you think is like? I have some ideas about this, but what do you think is like the trend towards I'm trying to see how I best ask this question without like being biased, like
Well, let me say
mhm,
something really quickly. So you can use Facebook because the algorithm is great and you'll get new people in. However, you don't own those relationships. What's nice about Crowdcast is you create those relationships, and then if you can connect it to your email, then you can continue that conversation with them afterwards. And again, it feels more authentic when you're in Crowdcast as opposed to it's just on something on Facebook. But for me, the ability to connect that to your email and to able to continue those conversations via email has been, larger, more meaningful to me. On Facebook, they're just like, here's a comment, and then they go away, and I don't see them ever again.
exactly, yeah. So that's the piece that I think, um, yeah, there's a lot of debate over. Is do you choose to spend energy on building a followership on like YouTube or Facebook, or do you choose to
Right.
grab emails and build a direct relationship with them, right? So for you, you're saying that it was more valuable to be able to own that audience over getting distribution and discoverability on other platforms.
Right. Well, because I have a
Hmm.
business and I would like to still have these relationships with people who are interested in our topic and possibly invite them to more workshops and to more classes or one-on-ones, whatever we can do to help them with. And so that is the goal for TypeEd. Um, with Adobe, it's totally different. So we need the Crowdcast for Adobe because the competitors are students, and we want to keep the chat really private. We don't want them, you know, talking to their teammates on Facebook. We want to keep it really private in here. And then only the public version goes out to Facebook. So if they have friends or family who want to watch how they're doing in their tournament, that can be done. But when they need to talk to their teachers, it's here on the private chat within
Got
Crowdcast.
it. Got it.
And so those are totally all
Now,
private. Yeah.
now, just a theoretical question. I mean, what if you could get discovered on Crowdcast as well? Would that be valuable for most likely, I guess, TypeEd, but would that be valuable for that show?
Yeah, I think it would be very valuable. But again, if you take a look at our profile, there's like no shows because because we're not using Crowdcast for
Hmm.
that. So I guess again, it depends what is exactly your goals and how you want to use it. Like to me, Crowdcast is great because it's got the best of both worlds. You can, if you want to have something public and you want to get some more distribution, you can push it out to YouTube and
Hmm.
Facebook. Or if you want to just keep it intimate and just have a small one-on-one or a group coaching call, you can do that too. So what's nice is that the audience, whether they are public or they're private or they're paid, they have the same experience. And so it's not like, let's try Blue Jeans or let's try Zoom or let's do, it's too much complexity for those of you who are just wanting to connect with you. So to me, the Crowdcast has been easy to use for every single aspect we
Cool,
need.
cool.
So
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take a question from the audience. I mean, Nasima actually has I think it's Nasima McElroy, if I'm saying that correctly, let me know, is asking about sort of the level of experience required to join your events. Would you say it's pretty advanced, or what is the skill level required to join a TypeEd show?
yeah, so it's really very basic. So, I mean, you'll pretty much learn anything from any level of design that you are either studying in or working in, from from our guests. So, for example, the last one that I had 2 weeks ago was with Nadine Shaheen. She is the UK, or she's the former UK type director of Monotype. And she is really into politics and the typography of politics. So she is a Lebanese type designer who's been doing so for 13 years. She works with a lot of advanced type design, but just listening to her, I think you would learn something. So it's really interesting to know about politics of not only typography but also Arabic type and how that is being perceived. In terms of like type distribution.
Cool. So one, the topics you guys are focused on is accessible to the general audience. Is that right? Okay.
It
And
is,
two,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
curious, Nassim says that's really fascinating about, I'm also interested about that last talk. Was it related to that? I mean, there's like a typeface that merges Hebrew and Arabic, or maybe it was Hebrew and Farsi.
Yeah. That is Liron. I'm missing her last name, but yes, I had her on a separate
Oh, cool.
interview. Yes, it's amazing that her work that she does. But no, it wasn't the Nadine was not the designer of that one.
Yeah.
But yes, I addressed that one
That's
too.
cool that, I mean that's a whole
Hmm.
nother topic on its own, but like how you can affect political change through typography. I don't think most people,
Oh,
think
definitely.
about that.
People don't think about that because typography is really just communication. It's the way we consume content. If it's invisible, it's just done really well. If it calls itself out and you don't understand it, that's when it's done badly. So that's why people don't think about it because it's invisible to us.
That's cool. That's cool. Um, awesome. I think there's yeah, I think that's the last question here. If there's any other
Okay.
questions that folks have, please drop them in below, so that we can get to that before the end. Yeah, I mean that basically covers like all the. I mean, there's so many things I could go much deeper into, but I feel like we need a whole other Crowdcast event for. Um, yeah, do you have what's the best way to contact you? I mean, for the folks out there, just hover over a face and you'll see the TypeEd logos and follow that account.
Yeah.
Are most of the events public?
Yes, most of the events are public. I do unlist them after I think a year or two when I just archive them. But for the most part, I think everything of last year is public. So definitely, check out the profile. All the past events are there, and you can watch the replays. Um, and there's some really interesting interviews in there. So there are all the typography dojo interviews. There are none of the classes or the one-on-ones or anything like that. Those are not public. So at least I hope not.
Cool. And then, and what website would you drop into the chat, or if someone can post that in there to learn more about you and TypeEd?
Yeah, so I would go to type-ed.com and I can type it in there, of course. And definitely, check it out. We are typography education, again, conducted online. We also do coaching. We do one-on-one. And then just, have fun. We just love geeking out about type and talking about how to better your typography and stop hurting the readers and stop hurting our eyes.
Yes, I hope we made some improvements since your last feedback on the Crowdcast text.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for hopping on the show. I mean, it's
Of course.
fascinating to hear just how typography can affect communication, can affect political change, and the way you feel about like a site and a topic. And it's really cool that you have a show focused on that. And if you're, if you're interested in hosting that online summit, let us know. We'll definitely help out and sort of in whatever way we can to make it happen. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks everyone for joining
Awesome.
me.
I'll catch you later.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Wow. Thank you guys so much for being here and asking really great questions about the whole typographic field. So if you haven't already, go to the top right of your screen and follow this account. You'll see like a follow button next to the Creatorcast word at the top right, and follow the account. So next time we go live, you're going to be able to join the episode. Now we've been going live every 2 weeks, and next 2 weeks from now, rather, our next guest will actually be Gina, who is the founder and CEO of Mighty Networks. And I'm going to actually drop in a little button right there. So underneath my face, click on that link and you'll be able to register for the next Creatorcast episode. And then, yeah, share this link with your friends if you really enjoyed it, and share the link for the next Creatorcast as well. Yeah, without further ado, yeah, that's it for now. So thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any other questions for Rachel, feel free to contact her. Go to type-ed.com to get in touch with Rachel and go follow her show as well. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.